The Aldis podcast is brought to you by Aldis International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Very happy to welcome Glenn van Kooijk and Amanda Salem from Artisan Studios. Thank you very much for your time today. Glenn, would you mind giving me a little bit of an overview about your background, how you got into the world of ServiceNow? And Amanda, if you might do the same, and then later we'll talk a little bit about your roles, your current roles.
Absolutely. So a little bit of myself. My name is Glenn van Kooijk, and as I said, I'm a senior solution architect at Artisan Studios. Artisan Studios is a boutique, very focused company that does enterprise architecture, solution architecture, and deployments of software based off of those assessments at executive level. And we do it pretty much all, but obviously ServiceNow comes up a lot because ServiceNow has so many capabilities, functions, and features that align to those assessments. Amanda?
Yes, thank you, Glenn. So I'm Amanda Salem. I was born here in Austin, Texas, and still here in Austin. And I spent the 2010s working in the Austin tech startup scene. So really building businesses from the ground up with the focus on what tech they run on. And I currently am technical portfolio manager for a large government-funded nonprofit. And I'm very familiar with scoped apps on the platform and really making a total experience so that one app is integrated into another, all on the same platform, so that everything works together.
And I would say that the reason why we kind of like do this 1-2 today, Mark, is that Amanda and I basically worked on this large nonprofit, and I came in obviously from that architecture perspective, and Amanda was very graceful and very knowledgeable to help me then also fill in the gaps that we don't know. I mean, as you know, ServiceNow is such a large tool that has so much knowledge. I'm not going to use the SAP word, but it's kind of like the same thing. It's so big that you need people to know the nooks and crannies.
Absolutely. So it's a really, really interesting time in the world of ServiceNow. And when you look at all the different modules and actually attending Knowledge, what was really interesting was how they started off the conference speaking about not-for-profits. Like they actually made the decision to start off and say, we're going to talk about not-for-profits, and they went straight into that, which I thought was bold, and I thought was really, really good for them
Yes.
to do that. And I really liked that. You must have been kind of thinking the same.
Yeah, no, we were. Amanda, I'll because Amanda was like really gushing about it. Go ahead, Amanda. You tell them.
Right. So yes, I was there at Knowledge this year. It was fantastic, and that opening, really showed everyone that ServiceNow can really support any type of business. So when you have a reactionary environment, or you have a tight budget, or you have a small team, there's always something in ServiceNow that can be integrated to really, promote hyper automation in these places that have historically had a little bit of a need for tech, and maybe that's overlooked. And so taking these old processes and, moving them into this century, and taking people into the Flow Designer workspace and making sure that their business processes, as they design them and think them, are actually materializing. So I call that speaking from the penthouse to the warehouse, understanding those business needs and being able to take those to the developers and make it happen in ServiceNow.
And I would also contend that that's like really like the inner workings and the tubings of it. But the big takeaway for me was you mentioned anybody, oh, we use ServiceNow. Oh, you must be a very big company. No, we're not. I mean, it's like it's business to scale, right? And so I take away the whole initiative of low code, the whole initiative of the modular approaches of ServiceNow, and say like, you don't have to have millions of dollars of budget. You can start small, but here's the thing: it's a platform that allows you to grow and modify as needed. Which I mean, that's what it's all about. It's about flexibility.
Yeah, because that kind of ties into my kind of question is, so for your business, how come you've kind of put such a focus on ServiceNow in terms of the different modules that they're actually looking to offer and share? Was there a particular reason why you made that decision to utilize so much of that platform within your business?
So a funny thing is that ServiceNow is obviously a platform that is really, really good at a lot of things. It might not be excellent, but I have this saying when I go and talk to the customers, and I say like, it good enough. There's people that say like, no, it's got to be a perfect match. They look for the unicorn. That's not ServiceNow. ServiceNow will tell you, here are these capabilities that I have, best of market, best of breed. Use them. You don't have anything, so it's like yeah, I always make the analogy of, I'm a 16-year-old kid that needs to drive, and all of a sudden this 16-year-old kid turns into Michael Schumacher and says, oh yeah, but I need the suspension to be this and the engine to be that and the chassis to be that. It's like, drive the car that we're building for you. And so ServiceNow tailors to that, and that's the reason why it is a very quick time to market. TTM is essential for a lot of companies. We are in 2023, where basically the turnaround of an unmet need, a problem to an unmet need, to a solution, to a business value. Those cycles used to be measured in years. Now they're measured in months, right? And that's where ServiceNow comes in, because it allows you to do that quick turnaround.
Absolutely. And I'll add, in any space these days, everyone's always looking for that digital transformation, and the flexibility of the ServiceNow platform really has anything to meet any need, whether it's an out-of-the-box module or a scoped app that we take and create into something that suits the exact needs. So it's all there.
And I might want to add that, as we are kind of like trying to do this for small, large, or whatever companies we are, right? But like the collaboration that Amanda and myself had with this large nonprofit, it really turned out that we wanted to provide value quickly. And so within a year's span, we went from, we have nothing to, well, we deployed this, and this. Is it? And I literally brought it down. I said, is there an 80% match? No, I said, is it 60% match? But they got so much out of it. They were able to make decisions that it took them months in weeks. They were able to prioritize. They were able to actually allocate funds to areas that were essential so quickly, because they were able to make well-informed decisions. And ServiceNow really enabled that.
And when you're working with customers, how do you help them on the journey and then take them to the KPIs as well?
So so usually what and I use something that the University of Stanford has done for the bio industry, and it's called bio design. So, and what we do with that is that you tap into what is your innate necessity as an individual, and therefore it permeates to the companies. And that is, everybody is really good at telling you what their problems are, but nobody is really good at articulating what their unmet need is. Now, biodesign does that. And so what we established with that approach was, okay, don't tell me that you can't write this report. Tell me what happens if you don't get the report. Solve the problem behind the problem, which we call that an unmet need. And then all of a sudden, we found out that we were spending 80% of our capacity on a report that was being delivered to one person. And I said, that is not, that is I think that's a bigger problem than the unmet need. What happens if you don't get that report? And the answer from the sponsor was, I will be sad. And it was very interesting that in a room of the C-suite, because this was this at C-suite level and board level, everybody kind of like looked at him as like, wait, so we have externals, ServiceNow, and these internal people all working for you for this report that you actually don't have a follow-up on. It was an eye-opening, right? And it was interesting to see how that worked. And so this approach, plus the ability of ServiceNow to then, once you have established that unmet need of your problem statement, then you go down the road of what I call capabilities, functions, and features. Okay, so ServiceNow has this great grid of capabilities across all their verticals. I don't know if you've ever seen it. And what it does, it tells you this is the capability, this is a capability. Let's say ticketing. It's a capability, and it has all of these functions. And within those functions, tool specific. So for me, capabilities and functions are tool agnostic, and features are tool specific, right? So ServiceNow has, as a product, spent a lot of time into defining that. So when you have established your unmet need, your problem statement, obviously a little bit of process management, we then say, here are the capabilities that resolve that for you. Here are the functions for it. So now you're deep diving into those things. And here are the features. So it was very quickly for us able to determine, and I'm going to let Amanda explain that because she was the one that made it happen once we determined that. Okay, so we need to use ticketing engine. We need to use SPM. Oh, and off SPM, we need to use, for example, the alignment planner. And then from there on, we started then deploying. Amanda, did I miss anything?
You did great. And to echo Biodesign, that's a fantastic book. It's probably thicker than the PMBOK, so it's a fun read, but it really helps someone in the business and analysts and portfolio managers understand that what the business's needs are to actually define those capabilities. And I think it's extremely important to define power users, because if you're standing up a ticketing app, like Glenn said, or a scoped app, or just one of the modules in ServiceNow, there will be those people. And they might either just be really excited about tech, and those are the best people to design a power user role for them. And these are non-IT people, to clarify. They are the users. And so you might have people who are really excited to do the testing and understand what the upgrades are going to bring. You might also have people who are just super great managers and want to be there for their team and support those different enhancements. So I think power users are extremely important to define, and making sure they have a run book of how the app was actually designed so they know what it does. And that way, if there is a testing or an enhancement to do on a new capability or a break fix or something, have them do the testing. And that way they are not only verifying, outside of IT that it is meeting the business's need, but they're also educating themselves in the process.
Yeah, and I love that you can pick from that menu, you can see what's the most important part of that module to introduce, and bring those internal champions on the journey, and then help them drive it through, because you need people on the ground who are seeing the benefits of it, because we'll know that spreads like wildfire where people want to have that, and kind of like FOMO, people just don't want to miss out. They want to have that and being able to access that, right? Because people don't want to come to work each day and be lost in bureaucracy and stuck in the mud. People want to succeed. They want to just be able to, feel like they're being efficient and productive. And, I think that's why we've got so many raving fans for ServiceNow, because that platform, is the platform of platforms, allowing people to be super efficient at what they do. And I love how you're allowing people to do that next best action and kind of feel like you're going on that journey. And for a lot of people, they don't necessarily know what the true challenge they're facing, because so much times they've got the symptom and the cause kind of mixed up, and then what do they actually really need is a bigger question. So it's we could have separate podcasts on each of those different elements, right? Asking a lot of effective open questions to get there. So when we look at the journey that the users go on, and you're helping them with that journey. You're gathering feedback, and you're looking to improve it and educate the team and just drive success. And those stories come from. How important is it to have the right people working within the team and those
Oh,
implementations and getting that right?
no, that's absolutely essential. And so we talked about how we take people in the journey. That's a big thick a thick pipeline of people. You have people from the business, like and Amanda said, they may or may not have technical inclination. You may have people from partners. As I said, ServiceNow is so big and there's so many nuances and details. You need to have the right partners to be able to implement. I don't know everything about ServiceNow, nor do I aspire to, right? But I know enough to be dangerous, and I know enough with the experience to do that. And then so you want to have your your right balance. That's the word. In order to make to having the right people is to have a balance. As you know, there are some sponsors that are very hands-on, some sponsors that are completely hands-off, right? You need to deal with that. Then you have your day-to-day operations when you're doing all of this stuff. And obviously that's a balance of internal people, external subject matter experts for that matter, and obviously ServiceNow itself. I found it very refreshing and at the same time challenging that ServiceNow says, we're a product company. We don't do the consulting. You guys go figure it out. But if you get stuck, we'll get you the product experts to help you move along. I think that that's unique, right? If you go to Google and say, hey, Google, your Google Sheets has a problem, they go like, that's not my issue. You go to ServiceNow and you say, hey, look, we have this thing here. And they will open up the kimono, as I call it. And they will say, well, you know what? In a couple of months, here's what this happens. And that's very important to know. So invest in the network of ServiceNow experts. Invest yourself in it as a customer and also as a user, right? So it's a balancing act, and obviously there's a business component which I just talked about. I'm going to let Amanda talk about how it is important to have these relationships from a technical perspective and from a deployment perspective. So go ahead, Amanda.
Yes, thank you. And those relationships that you're talking about are very varied. So you have to have a wonderful prod support team and make sure that you have the right people to support the platform, because it's so varied and fantastic. You have to have a few different people with different levels of knowledge of the platform and modules to really support it and give the business what they need. I think it's also super important to, if you have a very reactionary environment and there are a lot of pivots in what needs to happen, to have an agile practice. So in ServiceNow, the agile boards are connected to everything. You can put them into the SPM module, and then the developers can pick up the stories attached to a portfolio and really understand the work that needs to be done and deliver it incrementally, so that if there is a pivot and the directive changes, there's at least something to be delivered before some different work gets done. And having the team really knowledgeable on that agile practice is key for sure.
And I may want to add, right, because ServiceNow, as big as it is, cannot exist on its own. You also need to have your interactions with your integrators, right? I mean, so if you have people that work in Confluence, although ServiceNow can do that, you know, if it's an established agile practice, like Amanda said, that uses Confluence, you have to marry that. But Confluence doesn't have the dashboards, for example, that the agile practice of ServiceNow. If you have a ticketing act, right? In which is kind of like a foundational ServiceNow, that's one of their big sellers, right? They basically use that. But if you have organizations that are doing logistical ticketing, well, then probably you're going to be living in tools like Atlassian or Blue Yonder, right? And you need to connect those as well. So one of the things that I always say that is important about the right, so you need to have right people at the business, right people at the ServiceNow technology, good integrators. And the bridge between those two requires very specific knowledge, which kind of like transitions a little bit of what are the roadblocks that you encounter. Okay, and so I'm going maybe a little bit ahead of time, but the roadblocks that we encounter as well is that because ServiceNow is so flexible and it has so many things, you say like, well, that does not exist, but you can go build a bridge yourself. And then all of a sudden you say like, oh, that's great. And then you start piling on top of it and you do an integration to it. And then you do the push and pull data and all that stuff and a process around it. And then 6 months later, ServiceNow says like, well, here's this module that does all of that for you, but you already just spent that. So this is very important that you look ahead of time. And as I kept saying, the relationship with the product owners, with the subject matter experts, but also the product owners of ServiceNow is something you gotta cultivate. You gotta tell them, it's like, I'm gonna do this because it may not be in a presentation, but they know. And so Amanda and myself and our team, as well as the partners that we were working with, we were notoriously famous because they said like, oh, you guys are gonna do this. Wait for it because in 6 months of the year, it's gonna be there. And you say like, well, what can we do in the meantime, right? So, and so that is important.
Right. And my final question, what advice would you offer to newbies coming into the world of ServiceNow and starting those implementations?
I would say,
go ahead.
Trust your stakeholders. They want to be more involved than, some might think. So I like to take stakeholders into the meetings where we talk about what the workflow is going to be. We have a very multi-experience environment sometimes when lots of different devices are being used and there's a lot of boots on the ground work. And so really understanding what they need and bringing them into those sessions where we plan the implementation. And at first they might not understand why they're there. Of course, they're not going to pick up on all the terminology, but they appreciate being brought along on the journey, and it does educate them and it helps them create the training tools that they need for their team to use the product to its fullest.
And I would say ServiceNow can be a bazooka or can be a fly swat, right? Less is more. That's my advice to anybody that wants to deploy ServiceNow. Is start easy. Yes, you can build a spaceship, but they need a swing to go back and forth on the tree. Let them enjoy that.
Great advice. You've been listening to the All This ServiceNow podcast, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with Glenn van Kooijk and Amanda Salem from Artisan Solutions. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the All This podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.allthis.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.